Where do you think things started to split off between Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs? He referenced in his press conference a couple years ago when things started to go weird. And I'm like, that's interesting because that's when Brad Treliving stepped in. What are your thoughts on when, this breakup really began?
I think it's that 2 years ago point. And it has nothing to do with Brad Treliving in terms of timing. I think that was just the year, and help me with my memory. That
23?
So they had lost to Florida.
Yeah, second round, 5 games.
Another series where, Mitch Marner didn't put up a lot of points, took a lot of criticism. Obviously, they went down 3-0 in that series. And I do remember, I believe there was 2 off days between games 3 and 4, down 3-0. And I remember one particular interview in Florida where he was so dismissive of sort of the criticism. I think it was piling up by that point, right? And so the split up here, on one hand, it's the team and the player, but it's really the city and the fan base and maybe the media is some degree of this. Like, I don't know how that stew looks, but I think for Mitch, it was becoming less and less comfortable to live in Toronto full time and be a Maple Leaf around that point in time. And obviously this is, if you overlay it with everything else we know that happened in his life, he's, since become a father earlier this year. He was, he's moving in a direction where he got married. He started a family now. I think that those two things were happening kind of at the same time. He was becoming less enamored with his life as a Leaf. And obviously his performance creates some of that too. Like, I'm not saying he's completely a victim here, but it was a hard life. He did it for what, 9 years? Mm-hmm. So that was about year 7. Where I'm identifying the point where I think it was uncomfortable. Ironically, this will be the road we can't go open that door over here and see this alternate universe. But that's when Kyle Dubas was willing to consider trading one of these guys, and you have to believe that was Mitch Marner.
So obviously, hindsight 2020, and this is all just fantasy. But do you think he actually does it?
The hard part to know is he was 100% going to gauge the market.
Yeah,
but I don't think Kyle, just knowing Kyle the way I do a little bit, I don't think he would have boxed himself in his mind where he's like, I have to move him. So if the offers were just pure junk, like non-starters, I don't think he would have made the move. Really what he was open to in that moment was, okay, doing the same thing here is not, like, he got to the point where some of us had been saying even earlier than that.
Yep. Like
as far back as the Montreal loss, I'd say, is really where those questions like, can you really expect a different result with the same group of guys at a time when the cap isn't rising? So there's not a lot of ways to improve the roster. Like, you can move around the third line left winger, but are you really affecting much change if the guys at the top of the roster aren't pulling the chain? And so that summer, I think he would have certainly wanted to listen and see what was out there. And they had until July 1st of 2023 to move Marner without any no trade protection being involved. So they could have traded him to any of the other 31 teams.
So July 1st, 2023 comes, his no move kicks in. Was Willie ever discussed?
I don't believe so, no. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're going to have to help me with some of the timing here. Did Willie, he didn't have a full new move at that point, right?
No, he was still, he was on the...
Sorry, let's rewind.
Yeah, sure.
Because this was actually one story that was my report. That was days after that loss. Kyle acknowledged this publicly, right?
Yes.
Days after that, he's fired.
Yes.
Brad Treliving's hired. And before anything can even happen, Brendan Shanahan calls each of those players or their representatives and says, don't worry, these changes don't mean that you're in danger here. Like, this is an organizational change, but you're still part of the plan.
Right.
So Brad Treliving was hired into the environment where it was expected none of those players would be moved.
Right.
So Willie wasn't really discussed because that wasn't what he was hired to do.
He wasn't allowed to move him.
Well, I guess that's where maybe, and if Brendan was sitting in this room, he might have said, well, if Brad had come to me and said this was I can't say that he wasn't allowed, but before he was hired, almost like your legs are taken out from you, if that's what you think. And quite honestly, I don't know that Brad Treliving in that moment, you can't come in and trade one of those players.
Yeah, like, I know how a job works. When my boss wants something, I'm not going to come in and be like, no, I'm going to do the complete opposite.
I think a lot of us take that job, honestly. So, okay, I'm not...
Why does everything in Toronto happen out of order when you think about it?
Ooh.
Because Brad Treliving is now, right now, as we sit here, just over 2 years into his time as GM, his boss is now gone with a new boss. It just feels like it never goes top down.
This sequence of events.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and we could go all the way back to like the early 2000s and explain like they keep hiring out of order. Kind of.
This sequence of events it's infuriating because from that moment when they fired Dubas, it's like, okay, well, so here's what's going to happen. Brad's going to come in. He's not going to be able to do anything. Mitch his full no move is going to kick in. I guess they're going to extend Willie, and they're not going to get anything done. Sheldon's going to get fired. They bring in the new guy, but the team is fundamentally the same. Shanahan finally gets fired.
And honestly, if they had a won Game 7, I don't think he's fired.
No, they'd be in the Final Four.
That's a lot different from being eliminated in the
Yes!
second round.
I know, and I know how that game went down, and we don't have to go back into that. It's still one game.
Yep.
No, I know,
That's pro
but if I
sports.
had scales,
it's
I'd be
not
a
one
fish.
game though, CJ. It's 9 years,
Yeah, but it came down to one game.
and often that's what happens. But it was pretty clear. Like, listen, had Brendan Shanahan made the conference finals with any of these teams previous to this, maybe it doesn't come down to that game, right?
No, of course not. But I just think it's amazing that ultimately it came down to one.
Oh, I think it's something.
And I
It's-
think-
it's a lot of things.
What's interesting, CJ, is
It's probably easier that they lost the game 6-1 in a way because you don't go because you could play awesome and lose 3-2 in that game, and then you might be playing the game, but there's no with the way that happened.
Lucky us then.
Well,
I think I think
just saying.
I think too.
a little cleaner this way.
we gotta look at it too. Like Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment wanted to get rid of that role. Like they want to eliminate the president's roles. We just saw that with Masai and Brendan.
Well, they
within a few
they
weeks.
committed weirdly for the Raptors to do a search for a new president.
Yes, but that will be a president that doesn't make $14 million, right? It'll be a president that
but
makes
it was
$3.
it was odd with their commitment to
Yeah.
get rid of the president role to commit to a search for a new president. But CJ, like with the
Just wait a minute. I heard that Masai got paid much more than $14 million on the way out.
Oh, because he was bought out of his deal.
He had a 1 year left, and it was a
Like
hefty-
I heard, this is not my area of expertise, but north of $60 million.
6-0?
6-0?
Yeah.
They really wanted him out.
Well, no, I think
Holy moly.
it was to do with he had clauses in his contract that were tied to the growth of the overall team revenue,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
And so I don't know exactly how those clauses work, but I heard that he got a massive payday.
And he was Larry's guy, right? Like that was so was Shanny. They were Larry guys, right?
And to be fair, if you do work for a boss and that boss sees his or her interest grow, like he contributed to the success of the team.
Certainly.
Right? Like the value of the team is only what it is today in part because of what he did for 10 years plus.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying he doesn't deserve that money, but anyway.
Anyway, sorry,
and the
Jesse, go ahead.
timing on that respect is so very clear. Like as Rogers gains full control of the organization, they're getting out the people they don't want in the organization anymore, and they've never been a fan of Masai, and they didn't want to pay him that $14 million contract. And
And what are you doing? Are you
opportunity
giving
to get-
him a raise on that? Like,
Yeah.
let's face it, the Raptors have kind of been in the mud. It was probably time to say goodbye to him.
Yeah.
Probably the same for Brendan, quite honestly. I mean,
Yes.
obviously he wanted to stay and all those things, but
I wanted a winning team.
Well,
we don't always get what we want.
they won a lot of games.
I don't care.
So
None
happens
of the
if-
ones that I wanted.
What happens if they don't win many games going forward? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but are you going to view
that's
it
everybody
differently?
on Twitter.
Yeah, no. So that is that, and people they're gonna dance about that, and I'm at peace with it because this purgatory is killing all of us. I think it's killing a lot of Leaf fans' brains. This looking great, literally great every year, blowing it in near identical ways. Like we
Yeah, it was like strangely predictable.
Oh, the moment the Leafs won Game 5 against the Bruins, I'm like, well, this is going 7, and they're going to lose. And they did. And then Florida, they go down with that horrible Game 5. And we're all like, so we're all in agreement how this ends, right?
Like, do you know the view in the Panthers room was when they saw the way the Leafs fans turned, and I'm not saying in a bad way, on the team at the end of Game 5, they knew that the pressure would be so huge in Game 7 that they probably weren't going to see the best of the Leafs. And it's not to blame the fans. It's more to point out that the Panthers gained strength mentally, knowing the way that they'd kind of broken things on the other side with that Game 5 win.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens though.
And I was
they're-
told that from someone in the dressing room.
Yeah,
I'm not speculating on that. That's right from.
I mean, I believe that.
Jesse,
I believe that.
continue your question.
Sorry, we're all over the place.
Yeah, before we look to the future,
I want to keep going with Mitch too here. So.
totally. Yeah, this is about Mitch.
I come in and we just go in the ditch.
Steve and
You go
Chris.
the last episode we did last year in July, early July. I think it was like around the 8th. It was called "The Thought and the Feeling." Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The conclusion that CJ is the thought and Steve is the feeling. It was a wonderful episode. If you can go back and watch it, do it.
Oh, it's hilarious in
It's the
retrospect.
thought.
Hilarious.
But the question, going back to 2017, that Leafs team that loses to the Capitals, seeing how the next almost 10 years plays out with Mitch Marner and all that, are you shocked that it played out this way? Because that team there, everybody thought had a couple championships, a couple deep runs in them, so much hope and looking towards the future with all of their star talent. And we get this point where they lose a guy and nothing's been accomplished. Knowing that 2017 CJ was there around the team, how do you feel looking back from that team to this team?
They underperformed. I mean, there's no way around that. I think at that point in 2017, you'd say the worst case for this Leafs core is that they become those Capitals. And remember, those Capitals were known for not getting over the hump, having magnificent regular seasons. They won multiple President's Trophies early in the sort of Ovechkin, Backstrom, Braden Holtby era, Carlson, all those guys. And, but they were at least getting to the second round basically every year. They got to 1/3 round, I believe, where they lost, and then they finally won in 2018. But you would have thought that was the worst case scenario for the Leafs. And in the reality, the Leafs got to the second round twice now in this era. So they've definitely won fewer playoff games than those Capitals did. And they didn't win the President's Trophy, which I realize is nothing necessarily to celebrate, but it is a sign. Like, I can understand why Washington's management kept doubling down on that team, because they were scoring the most goals in the league and finishing as the best regular season team. So there's no way around it. From that moment, there was so much hope. Like, I don't even know how much history we want to do here, but
All of it.
Well, when you think about it, like, Babcock was a sign of hope at that time, right? When he came to Toronto.
Yeah.
And they tanked in the perfect tank because they weren't even that bad. And they actually won the lottery, which you don't always do when you tank. And Austin Matthews scored 4 goals in his first friggin' game. Like,
40 in his first season.
Right. And even like you drafted Marner 4th and he fell to you, frankly, because, the Coyotes took Strome. Turned out to be a great player. But I mean, Mitch immediately was a more effective pro from the moment. And even William Nylander, like, he was probably he's come on later in his career in terms of how he's viewed publicly. But like, they had all these guys in this moment. You just felt like in a league where it's just hard to amass that kind of talent, and they're so young. And they're already good when they're young, and they're making the playoffs in that first full season together.
And they had other players. They had JVR, they had Bozak, they had Kadri, they had Riley, they had
Hyman.
Gardner, Hyman. There were guys that
Connor Brown.
Very valuable.
Connor Brown was a good player.
Yes, he
Really
was.
good.
Still is.
Yeah, but I mean, they had to let him go at that time when they were in a cap trouble.
Yeah.
Remember his trade to Ottawa. But like, had they held on to him, if they could have kept that all together on it, like, you'd still want a team today, probably with Kadri and Hyman on
Absolutely.
it. And Brown.
Why were they in cap
Hold on.
trouble?
So let's not
How
go to
come?
that. I want to go to this because I think this is important. We got to talk about this part. One of the things Mitch talked about in his press conference was the fact that it seemed like there were some sort of trade talk last year between the Leafs and Vegas, and that he and his family sort of mentioned or talked about the fact that they would be interested in that prospect. And obviously nothing came of that because I believe the Leafs reportedly wanted Shea Theodore, and Vegas was like, yeah, we're just not going to do that. We'll wait a year. And obviously that worked out for Vegas pretty well, being patient on that. I think for a lot of Leaf fans, Chris, this feels like a guy that probably should have asked his way out, knowing that in retrospect, because for a lot of people,
but he didn't have to.
I know. So just let me just pose this, and then you could poke holes in it, because he didn't have to. But their thing is, how could you possibly have your heart and soul in this when you're a summer before talking about the next place you're going to go? And I think it's because most fans have never been in that position. Maybe that's a normal thing that players do and they talk about and whatever. But I feel like there's a seething resentment for, hey, so you weren't really in this anyway. And is that a fair comment to make?
I don't think the trade talks with Vegas and Toronto last summer were that real. Okay. Like I think there was a discussion or discussions, but it wasn't like this was necessarily a real thing that was going to happen at that point. Once it got into the season and Marner wasn't negotiating, it became more urgent, obviously, for the Leafs to try to get something back for him. And you had the Carolina discussion, which he didn't want to go to Carolina. And at that point in time, it was much more real where Mitch knew maybe there's a chance you go to Vegas. And it was communicated one way or another. The Leafs knew if they could make a trade work, he would go to Vegas at that time. Because he didn't want to go somewhere where he wasn't going to sign an extension and be long-term.
And he wasn't going to do that in Carolina.
With a 7 months pregnant wife.
Yeah.
So I think that whole flare-up around the trade deadline is where all of this was like very much it could happen. Everything before that was pretty hypothetical. It was a lot of it was the stuff that GMs are doing all the time. Hey, would you ever think about this? That's
what would it look like if this?
I think that's literally the way a lot of GMs have to talk to each other, because you're almost just like postulating an idea. Like, would you ever consider trading one of your star players? And if you did, I think that's how it kind of goes. It's not really like, all right, we want Marner. and like, I don't think I think it's far more almost like, hey, could we dream up a scenario that might work for everyone? And I think it was very loose last summer, call it. And I don't think it ever got to the point where it's like, hey, Mitch, we got a deal. Would you go to Vegas? So I don't know how much Vegas was truly in Marner's mind last summer. Like, it's not a mystery that he would want to play there, but frankly, right now, star players on lots of teams around the league probably hypothetically would be interested in playing in Vegas. For all the reasons Mitch is there, but all the reasons that Alex Pietrangelo once signed there, and Mark Stone signed an 8-year deal right after getting traded out of Ottawa, and down the list, Max Pacioretty. I mean, like, they've always been able to attract top players. So I don't think this was, in reverse, it's getting written far more like this was destiny. It was always going to go this way. First of all, I think Mitch would have played in other cities. Certainly believe Dallas is a place he would have played if there was a world where that made sense. It didn't make sense. They went and got Rantanen at the deadline. They don't have the cap space. We all know what happened since. But like, I don't think it was Vegas or bust all along. I don't believe that this is as nefarious as it looks. And quite frankly, any player that's a pending UFA, you could make the same point about. How much is his heart fully? I mean, he just had his best season statistically. So I don't think you can say that Mitch didn't hold up his end of the bargain. Maybe you wanted more in the playoffs, but you've said that other years when you didn't question where his heart was. I mean, I don't think he did anything wrong in this circumstance. I mean, if you wanted to try to have a cleaner exit, there was maybe that way. Maybe you go to them last summer and say, hey, look, guys,
I'm not going to sign here.
But the one thing we don't know is in the back of his mind, maybe he was thinking, maybe this is the year we go and win a cup and maybe I want to stay. Like, I don't know that he closed off the possibility.
Yeah.
But it was another year the same for him too, right?
How do you think the Leafs received the conversation between his management group and them saying, we're not going to negotiate in season? Because what I was told was they sat down, they said, we're not negotiating, don't bother, we're going to free agency. How do you think that was received in September? Was that a surprise? And if it was a surprise, why was it a surprise? This is where it's less to me about Mitch and more to me about the Shanahan era and how this team was managed.
I don't know that answer. It's a fair question. Look, I think that they were trying to keep hope until February that they were going to re-sign him. Like, I think that it was always in their mind that maybe he'll soften, as this gets closer. But if anything, the fact that he didn't bend on that, I think they got to February and late February and into early March, and we're like, oh, wow, okay. He's not staying. So now and they were too late. If you judge too late by managing your asset.
I do.
And that's fair.
I do.
But, they still had him contribute 102 points last season, and they had him in the playoffs, and they got to Game 7 of the second round.
And for the fans that are, and I just want to dispel this and we can move on, for the fans that are pissed at guys like Ryan Reeves or Max Pacioretty, because Marner named them both because they both played in Vegas.
Come on.
Just because he said, what's it like to live there? And apparently he and his wife were talking at Four Nations with some of the Vegas players and their wives about what it's like to play there. Again, for Leaf fans who feel a little stung, that feels salt in the wound, is it landing the way that it should? Is that a misrepresentation? Was it misspoken? And is that something that players do all the freaking time and it's not a big deal?
Look have you ever had a job? Anyone out there that's mad about this? Have you ever had a job and wondered, what would it be like to work across the street for this other boss who may be better, or in this other city? I mean, it's the conversations we all have.
Yeah.
Like you and I might sit here and go like, hey, I mean, between all of us, we've worked everywhere in media. We could easily turn these mics off or keep them on and have a really honest discussion about what it's like to be employed at Rogers or Bell or the Nations Network or all of these places. I think it's the normal conversations that happen. What maybe isn't normal is Mitch said that into a microphone.
Yeah.
Like he said that at his Vegas introductory press conference. But, if you've worked for someone, like you always wonder what it might be like to work somewhere else. I think frankly, it would be surprising if those conversations weren't happening. And I suspect if we were, in Winnipeg and this was Nikolai Ehlers, I suspect he was having conversations like this about Carolina. He mentioned, he knows Frederick Anderson. They're both Danish, right? They go back. Like, I bet he had discussions in
I think the difference is that Freddie Anderson wasn't a Jet at the same time. I think that's where people get annoyed. Is like, well, hey, these guys were both
but we don't
employed by the
know
Leafs.
all those conversations. Usually those conversations are kept in private.
Yes.
My point is there might be guys on the Jets that he had those type of, and maybe about cities he didn't even sign in, right?
Sure.
Maybe, hey, you played in New York. What's that like? Well, yeah, it doesn't sound like it's for me. Like, I think there's lots of things you can be critical about, and you can be mad. You can be mad as hell. That's your right as a fan. But I don't think you should be mad at people who are being a good friend to someone. Because that's really, I view that as, I don't think it's crossing any lines. It's certainly not illegal by any way. And I do think it's literally when I worked at Wendy's in Coburg on Division Street, I looked across the street and there was a McDonald's. And I probably at that time was like, hey, wonder, do they get paid more over there? Do they get treated better? And I can tell you damn much, if I had learned they got paid more or they got treated better, I would have walked across the street and turned in my hat and put another one.
Where's your loyalty to Wendy's?
Well,
CJ, come on, man.
I mean, we're only dealing in hypotheticals.
Yes.
I put in 3 good years there. I left on good terms, moved to Toronto.
Set
never looked
records at the
back.
drive-thru. So
man.
that's one of my favorite stories of all
I know.
time.
I wish I had more Wendy's stories. That's a good one to come away with, but I don't have a lot of I don't have a number 2 or number 3 story. It's mostly like, yeah, we made a bunch of burgers and sometimes we snuck a few into the drive-thru to our buddies. That was about it.
Jesse?
How close was the tampering issue? How close were we to actually getting a tampering charge on one of these teams?
I don't think it was that close.
No.
I mean, my sense is, well, certainly when the trade went down, I think that takes it off the board.
Yes.
Because, that was an emotional time when it was all coming to a head. And
It was a crazy weekend.
It was a crazy weekend. Obviously, the Leafs are losing a 102-point player in this.
40-hour draft.
Yeah.
Right. But if you do step back and just the known facts, including the fact that the Leafs and Vegas had discussions at the trade deadline in which Mitch Marner or his representative communicated that he would waive a note. Like, everybody at the table knew, hey, if there's a trade, you would go there. So, I mean, tampering it's a slippery slope in this league.
Right.
Because I do think that there's a lot of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But what actually rises to tampering is like having a contract done ahead of time. And I don't think anything like that happened.
Okay.
At all.
Was the trade to avoid all of that mess? Or was it more so for the 8 years? Or was that 8 years thrown in there to avoid the mess?
Well, it was 2 things. It was a guarantee for Vegas. Because as much as they know Mitch Marner would like to play in Vegas, if it gets to July 1st at noon Eastern time, there's always the possibility someone comes in with a 20% offer, a max offer, like some deal they wouldn't do. And as much as you might say, well, he still wants to go to Vegas, but maybe if LA is offering $18 million a year, who knows? Like, I might change my plans in those cases. So it gave Vegas security. It gave them the 8th year, which I think was valuable to the team. The 8th year is valuable to the player in this case. And in the Leafs, they got a serviceable 3rd or 4th line centerman out of it, which is better than nothing. Mm-hmm. It's not amazing. There's no way to sell that as a win for the Leafs, but I do think it's better than truly letting him go. So it brought some finality to it, and I do think it removed it. But I was obviously talking to people at the league at the time all these allegations were going around, and I never sensed it had any legs.
Wow. So the fans.
I'm not saying people didn't. Maybe within. Like, I don't believe Elliott made this up. So I should be clear. I just don't think this was ever going to be seriously investigated. I don't know if it was anything more than just frustration. Mm-hmm. about the way everything was kind of unraveling and ending.